Yeah, so you were alluding to something there, which I think is quite interesting. You're talking about area business units that you could advocate this type of approach to get this under
Right.
control. It sounded like they had two key criteria. A, they've got a high work delivery dependency or potentially outsourced service dependency. And two, they've got tight margins. That is the kind of the pincer movement of the drivers, really, it seems. That's definitely something that we've seen in organizations. And
Yep.
even if you're trying to look at organizations that might want to procure services more effectively and manage that spend more effectively and get the best performance out of those suppliers, that's probably more important to an organization that has a high dependency on outsourced service providers and is in a margin tight market, because the ones that don't just kind of the stuff just gets a free pass. Like you were saying, the kind of, $1 million threshold. I see a lot of organizations that are at least 500K, millions, fairly chunky.
Right.
But, there can be the Wild West going on in some organizations and they just don't care, or they don't seem to care. Maybe they're just, printing money too easily. But they could be more effective. I always think they could be more efficient. But within organizations that do work in those tight margin industries or business units that match that need a lot of work outsourced in one way or another, this is a pretty fundamental problem that they're going to have to address, really.
Yeah, and I guess we can all bring it back to home and how do we manage our homes, right? And do you just close your eyes and grab the first contractor or first service provider that comes by, or do you read your Google reviews and do you do a little due diligence around getting the work done? Now, some work is very relationship dependent, right? With high level relationships with large consultancies or large service providers, and I get that. And that's where it's important. Again, I don't know. I guess contingent labor has become kind of my first love. Now, my second love was supplier performance management. And it was more to develop relationships, not to, point fingers, etc. But hey, we're spending X millions of dollars with you, and we expect to get Y, and we're getting Z, and etc. So, what are we going to do together to make that better? One other area that we started hitting on with the with that AI as well was not just around SOWs and what we would see coming through services contracts, but this kind of area around smaller apps doing software as a service, right?
Ah,
Service is a word, and I know the kind of company you have, Zivio. It's a software as a service, but we're seeing a lot of these pop up for under 100K, and we didn't have in procurement, indirect procurement, we didn't have people, we brought in some contract buyers, procurement people, contract specialists to help with that, but it was the number per month was getting overwhelming. So we started applying some of the same thinking to contract as a service. Do we really, well, that is, or I'm sorry, software as a service, do we really need to do that contract? What are we buying? And have we bought that somewhere else? And today you could apply the same thing to AI agents. And, kind of if you're starting to buy either pre-developed agents or somebody to help you build agents, etc. Are we doing that somewhere else in the company? Which led to me thinking about, hey, how do we put technology into some of these contingent labor systems as skills, right? So we heard it, and I'm sure the number is way, way higher because this is 5 to 7 year old numbers, but we have bots doing about 700 reports throughout the company. Well, really, I'd like to have one of those bots. How do I know what bot we have, and how do I know we haven't bought that bot 5 times over to do financial reports or whatever operational type reporting? So Just thinking back to more the contingent labor world on skills and how do I hire a bot? How do I hire an AI agent? How do I, right? And not saying that the perfect place is putting them in a VMS system, a Beeline or a Fieldglass or a Vinly or whatever, but ultimately you do need to get an understanding of how you're hiring that service, software as a service, agent as a service, etc. Um, New problems for a new day, but that's
It's
uh,
a, it's a great point, Ling. It really is a
multiplies
great
it.
point. Yeah, and I've spoken to some organisations and I've been involved in some conversations at kind of like UK government level where they're looking at, AI agents as a worker category.
Right,
And it's, joking aside, just saying, how are you going to get work done? You've got your permanent headcount, you've got your contractors, your temps, your directly sourced contract workers, and your gig workers, and your chunk of service providers, and then you've got
right.
AI agents as well. And it's really fascinating. But you make a great point in comparing the potential for people to double and treble up on
Mm,
buying agents or engaging agents or building agents in exactly the same way as SaaS contracts can build up. It's like, again, comparing it to home life. You end up with like all these different apps, and if you've got a teenage kid, you look at their app spend and then you look at their phone and you're like, well, you could do those three things with that one over there. But it's easy for that sort of stuff to creep up on both individuals and organizations.